I kind of feel, and you're probably uniquely positioned to answer this in many ways because of your Indian family background. You grew up in the UK, you've now live in LA. So you've got a whole mix of different cultural kind of exposures within you, right? And, Brits are known for their stiff upper lips and, traditionally, and a lot of Brits have struggled with this concept of, expressing gratitude or telling your friends how much they mean to you. I'm sure you'll know this, it's not a very British thing to do. What is your take on that? Do you think it's changing? And have you noticed a difference in how people approach that in America?
Yeah, so I'll be honest and say that one of the things I love about being with my friends back at home, all my best friends in London, and I was just there for the holidays and I spent a ton of time with the lads. And it was one of the best things is our love is shown by how deeply we can banter with each other, right? Yeah. Like as the deeper you can cuss someone and diss someone, the more you love them and the more you can take it back. And I love that. Like to me, that's so much fun. And me and my guy friends do it all the time when I'm back in London. I would say that my feelings about how I want to live are less impacted by Indian, British, or American culture, and they're most impacted by my monk life. And the reason I say that is because I think in every country you can find lots of different people, lots of different identities, lots of different cultures. But the way I live is what I learned as a monk. And for me, the idea that someone could die at any given time makes every relationship in my life that much more important. And I don't know about you and anyone who's listening, but I don't want to regret the last thing I said to someone. And I don't want to regret the last thing they heard from me. And so I live that way. And with everyone in my life, I want the last thing they heard from me to be like, I love you. You matter to me. You're important to me. That doesn't mean I'm saying that 24 hours a day, but it does mean that if we've had a meaningful interaction, I want them to know that, because I would hate to live with the fact I had a friend many, many years ago who had the worst argument with his dad. They didn't argue often, but they had a really bad argument. And they didn't speak for a couple of weeks. And then a couple of weeks later, his father passed away. He wasn't old. He wasn't in hospital. That wasn't the natural course of events. No one saw it coming. And my friend held on to that pain for so many years because he hated that the last conversation he had with his dad, who he loved completely, was an argument. And so to me, it's not about whether we're British or American or Indian. It's looking at life through the lens of reality. And I think as Brits, we are very good at being realistic. Well, there's nothing more realistic than death and loss. And so living with that ideology and living with that understanding, we actually get to love people a lot more deeply. And the other thing I'd say is that I also want people to know how amazing they are while they're alive. I think we celebrate people too late. I think too many people in this world are celebrated far too late. And, I had the fortune of interviewing Kobe Bryant a few years ago, literally 2 months before he passed away, 3 months maybe before he passed away. I had no idea. Of course, no one did. And I think about that whenever I always get asked this question, like, which interview would you love to redo, or which interview, like, would you wish you could do again? And I'm like, that one, because had I have known, and it's like, but we should always know that. This, and it's not a morbid way of living. It's actually a more magical way of living, because you're like, this is such a special moment.
Yeah, I completely agree. Thank you for sharing that, Jay. Very, very powerful. I think there's I don't want to get the quote wrong. I'm pretty sure there's a Stoic phrase to do with when you kiss your kids goodnight, imagine it's the last time you're going to see them. Something like that. Please forgive me if I've got that quote slightly wrong, but that's certainly what I remember from it. And it's actually quite triggering for people sometimes when they hear that. And I've thought a lot about it. And I really like it, actually. And I think it really speaks to what you've just said. And I do think about this when I'm kissing my kids goodnight. It's so easy to rush it. Go, I've got work to do. I just need to put them to bed so I can get and do my emails. And again, I'm human, so I do fall into that trap. But I try and remind myself.
So do I.
Yeah, it's a nice reminder to go, hey, you know what? What if? And it's as you say, it's not morbid. It's just trying to help you be more present, to appreciate that moment. And, it really has extra poignancy at the moment for me. Because in the past few weeks, I have gone through some really challenging times, which I shared with you just before we spoke. And, my mum, who for many years, my brother and I have helped to care for, this is why we live where we do, we live nearby. Mum was admitted to hospital around Christmas, and she was seriously unwell, to the point where, for a few days we thought that was it, thought mum's dying, and I couldn't stop crying for days, and I went through a sort of grief process. Now mum has miraculously recovered. She's back home with a load of challenges, but every time I leave mum, every time I'm there and I say goodbye, I remember 3 weeks ago, Rangan, you thought you were never going to have another conversation with your mother again. I would have given my right arm back then. So even if mum's frustrated or she's asking for a lot and I've got other stuff on, so far, I've been really proud of myself. I'd be like, okay, I've been patient. I've been smiling. I've been calm. And I thought you would have given everything for this 3 weeks ago. You thought you were never going to have a conversation with your mum again. And, Dad died 10 years ago. I started to imagine, what's life going to be like with no parents? So when you speak about love like that, when you talk about make these interactions as if they're the last time you're going to have those interactions, I think it's really powerful. And I don't think it's morbid at all. I think, as you say, it does make our day-to-day life much more magical.
Yeah, no, really well said. And it's not meant, and if it is anxiety inducing for people, I do understand that and I empathize with that. And that's where I think we're talking about this subtle spot where it's like, you're not thinking, oh my God, I'm going to lose them. Oh my God, I need to tell them I love them. Like, that's not the mood. It's what you said so wonderfully, was like, I want to be fully present with this person because I love them. And something you were talking about earlier, I think, Rangan, I've learned something. I've moved and lived in so many different cities at this point in my life. I've lived in Mumbai, I've lived in London, I've lived in New York, I now live in LA. And I've had to make a lot of new friends at so many different stages in my life. Obviously, some of my best friends of all time, my best man at my wedding, everyone's back in London. And I still talk to my best friend probably 3 times a week back in London, and we figure out the time difference. But I've had to make so many new friends along the journey that I've learned to say how I feel. I've literally had to say to people as an adult, hey, I think we'd really connect. Let's spend more time together. Or, you know what? I think we'd make really good friends. Like, shall we connect more? And it's like, it sounds so stupid when you're looking at it from a childish view of, like, oh, Jay, you sound desperate. And I'm like, well, I am. For connection, I am. Like, I want real human life connection. And if that makes me look like a loser and desperate, hey, I'll take it, because I'd rather live my life having really beautiful relationships with people than live my life pretending like I'm too cool for that, or I'm too good for that, and I'm too important for that, and then missing them when they're gone. And I think sometimes we're just living in this false safety. We're actually scared of being open with people. And again, I'm compassionate. I'm compassionate to people who struggle to show love, because we struggle to show love because we're scared of losing that person. That's what it is. It's not that we're trying to act cool or we think we're better. It's because we're actually scared. If I really open up to this person and I'm vulnerable with them, and then they're not here anymore, I'm going to feel really all over the place. And so I get that. It also comes from a self-preservation.
Yeah. Has your wife read this book yet?
So my wife just finished reading Think Like a Monk, I believe. It's been 2 years now since the book's been out. And she's read bits of it, not all of it. I always say my wife is the number one supporter of who I am, but the least subscriber and listener to what I do. But she told me recently, because she's been in London because of her family and I've been in LA, she literally just started listening to my podcast, and she's been telling me how much she's enjoying it, which is actually really nice. After we've been married for 7 years, the podcast is 4 years old this year. And it's funny when after 4 years she started listening to it. She's like, "This is really good. I get it now. Why people?" I'm like, "You're hilarious." It's humbling and adorable at the same time. It's beautiful.